Hello, welcome. We are talking about authors today, not books specifically. I will of course mention books from the authors that I'm going to talk about, but I have nothing really truly new to share with you today. I simply want to talk about what I would have deemed auto-buy authors until I saw a video from Brittany over at Rescues and Reads who called them her read to zero authors, and I was like, you know what, that sounds a lot cooler than auto-buy authors. So let's talk about it. I have about 11 authors today who I would have previously considered my auto-buy authors. What I mean by auto-buy is I have read multiple of their works, or I've read at least one of their works and have deemed them of enough quality, in my opinion, that they're authors that I would like to read more of. So if I see them out in the wild, at the library, little free libraries, bookstores, Target, their books are magically going to appear in my shopping cart. Auto-buy authors. If they pop up on Book of the Month and I recognize their name because I love their works, they are coming home with me. Some of these people you have heard me talk about before. Some of them you certainly have not heard me talk about before. Let's go ahead and talk about my auto-buy authors or my read to zero authors. I have a bunch of thriller authors on here, which should come as no surprise to you. I have a couple of romance authors, and I have one really surprising because I genuinely don't talk about historical fiction on this channel, and that's because I don't read as much historical fiction as I do thrillers and romance. I've read maybe 20 historical fiction books in my duration as a reader, and that's just because it's not my favorite genre. But there is one author in the historical fiction realm who I read one of their books and I was like, that's it, it's over. I have to buy all of her books now. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. These are not really in any particular order. It's just as I was sitting there making my list, it's how they came out of my brain. So up first, we have Taylor Adams. I discovered Taylor Adams alongside, I'm sure, many of you, if you're a Book of the Month subscriber. I want to say that No Exit was the first book since I became a subscriber of his that was released through Book of the Month. So I selected Book of the Month when it came out way a long time ago and read it pretty quickly after receiving the box in the mail. And from there, I was like, wow, this is such an incredible book. He is such a talented author. I really need to read more of his books. So then when The Last Word came out this year, I had already conceptualized the idea of my book club, which is the Murder Robe Book Club if you are new here. And I was like, murder, check. Taylor Adams has a new book coming out. That's the one that I want to read first. So Taylor Adams actually launched my book club. His book was our introductory event. I also then, after, at the recommendation of my friend Kelly, who I had lent my copy of No Exit to way a long time ago, she went back into his collective works and found more books from him, and she asked me at the book club meeting if, aside from No Exit and The Last Word, if I had read any other Taylor Adams books, and I said no, and she said, well, you really should read Hairpin Bridge because I've read it and I want someone to talk about it with. So I went to the library and I borrowed Hairpin Bridge from Taylor Adams, and at that point, if I didn't already know that he was going to be an auto-buy author, I really genuinely registered, okay, I am going to read every book that this man has written. Out of the 3 books that I've talked about, No Exit, The Last Word, and Hairpin Bridge, Hairpin Bridge is probably my favorite. It is a great book. We have an unreliable narrator in that book. It's just so good, and I think about it pretty much constantly to this day. Taylor Adams, definitely going to be one of my read to zero authors, and even to the point where a lot of these authors have a pretty extensive backlist, and I might not have time realistically to go back into their backlist and read everything that they've published. But for Taylor Adams, he is one of the very few people who I would go back and seek out backlisted books from him. The next author that I want to talk about is Clare Douglas. Clare Douglas, I borrowed Local Girl Missing from my local library this summer, and it was such a well put together mystery that I was like, okay, I'm gonna keep her in mind, and if I see her at the library again, because this was the only book that they had from her on their shelves at the moment. And so I was like, if I see more of Clare Douglas's books, I will pick them up. And then I went little free library shopping and I found another one of her books, and I was like, you know what, this was a sign. I need to read more from Clare Douglas. Clare Douglas is an English author, I think, and for some reason I feel like I have a really great time with the English mystery thriller writers. I don't know what it is. I think that they just scratch an itch in my brain that is like the English major part of my brain. That's like, wow, they just really know how to write. And that's what I look for. I look for great writing, great storytelling. I need a character that is fully fleshed out, and I feel like Clare Douglas was able to do that in Local Girl Missing, at least in my opinion. But since I've only read one of her books, I don't really have very much to say. She is on my list of auto-buy authors in the wild though. I would like to read more from her. If I see more from her, great. I will keep an eye out on new releases from her, but I think that's gonna require a little bit more research on my part. So that's the first author that we have who I've only read one of their books. Let's move on. Once again, I have another English author, English like from the UK. I have another English author, and if you are a friend of mine in real life or a follower of this channel, you know that I love Lisa Jewell. She is probably second to Riley Sager. I have read at this point from Lisa Jewell 3 of her collective works. Then she was gone. None of This Is True, The Night She Disappeared, and I'm starting Watching You Today. I have a bunch of her books in my collection because when I read Then She Was Gone, which of course I discovered through Book of the Month, when I read that book, I sat down and I read it in literally like one sitting. I spent an entire Sunday just reading that book. I was so engrossed. She writes great characters. They are great in the sense that they are very creepy and very weird. I love that. She writes about content that I wouldn't normally feel okay consuming, in that a lot of times she has harm to children in her books. She has sexual assault in her books. She has a lot of things that wouldn't normally sit well with me in her books, but I think that she does it in a way that doesn't feel triggering for me. And so I enjoy her work. Anytime she has a book that is coming out on Book of the Month, it immediately goes into my cart. I have seen multiple of her books at my local library sales. I have seen her books in bookstores. Of course, if I see one that I don't have, it sneaks its way into my cart. I don't have enough great things to say about my love for Lisa Jewell's writing. I just love it. I think that she is a great writer, and I do look forward to diving into her backlist because I think she has like 21 books out, and for me it doesn't feel unreasonable to dive into her backlist because I enjoy her writing so much that I can like burn through a book of hers in like 3 days. A lot of these authors I really have discovered through Book of the Month, and I think that that's great. That's what Book of the Month is for, right? To help you discover books that maybe you wouldn't necessarily have discovered before. So the next author that I have to talk about is Simone St. James, who I discovered through Book of the Month a long time ago through her book The Broken Girls, which I was obsessed with. I love that book so much. I really couldn't put it down. I then read The Sundown Motel from Simone St. James, and then recently just finished the Book of Cold Cases. I have Silence for the Dead over on my book cart that I borrowed from my children's grandma because she read that after reading The Broken Girls and The Sundown Motel and loved it and recommended it to me. So this is an author who has kind of a backlist that I'm not sure if I will get to, but anytime she has a new release, it will make its way into my home because I love a good mystery thriller with the paranormal twist that Simone St. James always has in her books. The Broken Girls is one that I think about still to this day. So I think that it is one that stands the test of time for me. The Sundown Motel was also great. If you watch my recap or my reading vlog, you will know that something about the Book of Cold Cases didn't just hit right for me. Something was missing, and I can't really pinpoint what exactly fell flat for me. I think honestly that it was just that one of the characters didn't have as much of a story as I wanted them to. Moving on, let's talk about romance. I read a lot of trash romance, and by trash romance I mean the stuff that you find on Kindle Unlimited that is simply smut. That's the gist, right? I was talking to my best friend about this literally yesterday because I finished a book that she bought for me finally. I like sometimes a good slow burn feel good romance, not one that's necessarily all spice all the time. And I feel like Christina Lauren delivered that for me. Their books are just like feel good romances for me to break up all of the trashy smut that I read on my Kindle. So I've read quite a few of the works of Christina Lauren. one. I have read Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating, The Unhoneymooners. That was the first book that I read from them. I've read Something Wilder. I've read The True Love Experiment, The Soulmate Equation. I have Love in Other Words sitting over here beside me because it's one that I bought because I saw it and I was like, I love them. Genuinely, just something about their writing together feels so good to me. They have very likable characters in their books. They have very simplistic plot lines that are easy to follow. It's not all smut all the time, and the way that they write, it just makes me feel so happy. I am, at the very heart of my soul, someone who loves love. So I feel like Christina Lauren just hit that part of my heart that is like, I love love. I don't know how I discovered them. I know that The Unhoneymooners was the very first book that I read from them. I know I borrowed it from the library. So I must have had an ad for it, or Libby recommended it to me. I know that none of my friends recommended it to me, but I have recommended it to my best friend. I don't know how I discovered them. The point is, I discovered them. I love them. I will dive into their backlist to read more of their works when I need a feel-good romance, of course. All right, up next, we have another thriller author because, like I said, the brunt of this list is going to be thriller authors. B.A. Paris. I have, at this point, read 2 of her books. Nothing, I think, will ever compare to Behind Closed Doors for me. That book traumatized me in the best way, of course. I really don't think that I've read a book that left me feeling as unsettled as Behind Closed Doors. I know that I discovered B.A. Paris through my children's grandma because she made me borrow Behind Closed Doors because she was obsessed with it, and for good reason. That is an excellent, excellent book. And then I also read The Therapist, which is a newer release of hers, and that one I was left feeling a little dissatisfied with. It was an average read for me, but I still enjoyed her writing. I think that my frustration was, of course, the rehashing that we had to go through for that book over and over and over again. I have more of B.A. Paris on my shelf because once I read Behind Closed Doors, it was like, we have to auto buy her books if we see her out in the wild. So I also have The Dilemma, and I will seek out more of her books. I might not necessarily purchase them, but I will borrow them from the library if I find them. Next, I have another thriller author. If you watched the video that I published where my husband chose my TBR for me, you'll know that he picked up an author that I had never read before, and that was Jane Corey. She wrote Blood Sisters, and then she has another book that I purchased because of Blood Sisters. I read Blood Sisters in one day because it was so, so good. Again, I just have a great time with the British thriller writers. I don't know what it is about their writing that is so addicting to me. I just genuinely have a great time. So Jane Corey is going to be someone who I will read all of her books. I don't think that she has a super extensive backlist. At least from what I saw, she did not. So I should have an easy time getting through her backlist. All right, come on. Come on, center of attention, huh? Okay, girl, there we go. I think I'm gonna round out talking about thriller authors right now. I have 2 more that I wanna talk about. One of them is my add-on. Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen. I genuinely love their work as an author duo. I am not a huge author duo type of person. The 2 author duos that I enjoy are, of course, Christina Lauren and then Greer and Sarah. I think that they write such good thrillers together. I don't have enough nice things to say about them. Once again, we have an author duo I discovered through Book of the Month with an anonymous girl. That book I still think about and I recommend to people to this day. I love them. I think that they write very creepy, wonderful books. And I think that so far, all of the books that I've read from them have like a psychologist as a part of it, which I'm here for. I love a good domestic suspense featuring a mental health professional. So I've read An Anonymous Girl and The Golden Couple, but based off of just An Anonymous Girl on its own, I literally will read everything that they've written together. Anytime Book of the Month puts one of their books out, I don't even read the synopsis, it just goes into my box. I am a huge fan of them writing together, and I really would love to pick their brain about how they do it. Like, because often what I've noticed is that we have rotating POVs, and I wonder if one of them writes one person's POV and the other writes the other person's POV, because that's what I would do if I wrote in a writing duo, but I'm just curious. Maybe I should look up interviews with them or something. But yeah, I really love their writing, and I will continue to buy their books. I have not read any of their books that they've written on their own. I know that Sarah Pekkanen has released a book recently, I think. The last thriller author that I would like to talk about is one who I've only read 2 of their books. I loved them both. And the first book that I read from this author was The Couple Next Door, and I read it on my Kindle like such a long time ago, and I loved it, but then I forgot what the author's name was and I just couldn't find it in my Goodreads. And then I ordered Not a Happy Family through Book of the Month, and that's when I was like, oh my god, she wrote The Couple Next Door. And I'm talking, of course, about Sherry LaPena. I love her writing. The only reason that Not a Perfect Family was not a 5-star read for me is because of the end. I just felt like it wasn't great, but I will continue to buy her books as they come out. I, again, am not sure if she is one that I would necessarily try to read all of her backlist, but if time allowed, I would like cherry pick for the backlist. I love her writing. I think that she is very good at developing unlikable characters, because in both books, I was so like, how could you do that? Why would you do that? I don't like you. That was a terrible decision. I think that she's great at that. While I often find that I do need to like at least one character in a book that I'm reading, I feel like Sherry LaPena does unlikable characters so well that I didn't need to like any characters to enjoy the work. And so that is going to be it for the thriller authors that I'd like to read to zero. And let's talk about one more romance author. I just finished The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston last night, and if you have been here before, you know that my best friend bought that book for me for my birthday and has been texting me frequently to ask me when I'm gonna read it. So I finally read it. And I will say this, Ashley Poston writes an incredible slow burn romance. I wanna say that the characters in her books did not tell each other that they loved each other until like the very last chapter. I stand for that. I love it. It should leave me feeling unsatisfied, but something about it just works. And then I have also, of course, read The Dead Romantics. I love that book. But when I was making my list, I actually discovered that I read another Ashley Poston book a long time ago, and that was Geekerella. Geekerella was, I think, a YA kind of romance, and I really loved that book. It was so cute. So with that being said, I have read 3 of Ashley Poston's books, and as she continues to release new books, I will be picking them up. I love her writing. She does a great job writing likable characters. Now, will I necessarily dive back into the backlist? I don't think so. But as she continues to publish her romance novels, yes, I will. She is another like Christina Lauren, where it's not necessarily smut, but she does have spicy scenes in her book, but they're not graphic. Some of these authors do have very extensive backlists, and I'm just not sure that time would allow me, unless the only thing I did for the rest of my life was read. I don't think that I could do it. And then the last author that I have to talk about is a historical fiction author. Now, notoriously, I am not a historical fiction reader. I will read one if it's recommended to me, but it has to be very highly recommended to me. And if I were to have a preference for timeline for historical fiction, I do like the World War II setting. So with that being said, this author, I have only read one of her books, but it was so well written that I literally still think about it. And it was The Alice Network by Kate Quinn. I listened to the audio of that, and I, like at work too, and I was so engrossed in the story. Kate Quinn is an incredible storyteller, and I will read more of her books. I already added like a ton of her stuff to my TBR. She is a great storyteller, and historical fiction is not my jam. It's not my cup of tea. I have like 5 historical fiction books on my shelf, and I've read maybe one of them. It's not my favorite, but The Alice Network by Kate Quinn was great, and it really set the tone for her, in my opinion, as an author that I would read more of. With that being said, those are all of the authors that I would deem auto-buy authors, or authors I would like to read to zero if time allows. With the caveat, of course, that I will read all of their new releases and not necessarily dive into the backlog. And then here is just 2. I only have 2 authors who I have actually read to zero, so let's talk about them. Alex Michaelides. Is that how you say his name? The author of The Maidens and notoriously The Silent Patient. I've read both of his books, and I will read every book that he comes out with from here on, because I loved The Silent Patient so much. The Maidens was not as good in my opinion, but he is still a great writer, and that is what I look for in terms of like authors. I'm looking for somebody who can tell me the damn story, and he can tell the damn story. If you are not not new here, you know whose name I'm going to say. If you are new here, hi, I am a Riley Sager stan. I love his works. I will take no notes. Thank you so much. I've read every single one of his books and I've only disliked one of them. And I think that I disliked that because I was like, what the is this? That was Lock Every Door. The one where she house sits at that creepy house in New York. That one I didn't like. I didn't really like care for that one, but with that being said, I have enjoyed everything else that he's written. I discovered Riley Sager, of course, through Book of the Month with The Last Time I Lied. When I read that book, I knew that I was done for. I had to read everything else that he had written. And at that point, I want to say that The Last Time I Lied was only his second book. So I went back and I read Final Girls and loved it. And then I have since collected every single book that he has published and will continue to. Your head's in my way. And I will continue to collect every single book that Riley Sager publishes from now until he no longer publishes books, because I simply love his writing. Out of all of his books, I want to say that the only one left might have taken the top spot for me. My favorite, it was, until I read The Only One Left, it was The Last Time I Lied. I simply devoured that book in one sitting as well, and think about it still, recommend it still. I feel like it stood the test of time for me until, of course, I read The Only One Left, and I think that it was just the perfect gothic for me. I loved it. So yeah, that's that. Those are the 11 authors that I would consider to be auto-buy authors for me, and the 2 authors that I've already read to zero. I don't know what she's barking at. Probably the neighbor taking their dog out. Who are you barking at? Huh? Thank you. All right, so that's it. 11 auto-buy authors, or authors that I will try to read to zero, and 2 authors who I have purchased every book that they have published and have read to zero. So with that being said, thank you so much for being here with me today and tolerating this whole my dog blocking the camera thing that we have going on. I want to know if you have any authors that you intend to read to zero. If you do, let me know in the comments. I would love to know. And with that being said, that's going to be it. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, my friends, and I will see you in my next video. Goodbye. Okay. Oh.